Okay, so we have been doing a lot of activity with our science experiment with the paper airplanes. Well, we're going to take a little breather here to make sure that everything we need to do for this science experiment is correct before we do the experiment. So we're going to go over a few things. So get out your science notebook and all of your notes. Have your paper airplanes right there so that you are ready to double check your work before we actually do the science experiment. So the very first thing that you needed to do was you needed to come up with a question, okay? So we need to look at your question and make sure that your question that you asked about the paper airplanes is testable. Let's see what I mean by that. So look at this graphic organizer, okay? What I want you to do is I want you to copy this graphic organizer in your science notebook. So turn to a clean page and I want you to copy this graphic organizer. Now I'm going to be adding some stuff on here. So when I'm done adding, why don't you pause the video, take a screenshot, and then that way you can go back and add this graphic organizer to your science notebook. So we want to make sure that your question is testable, okay? So what did you wonder about the paper airplanes that you made, okay? So we want to make sure that what you're testing is testable. Like, is it written well? Okay. So a testable question is where one variable is changed and your results can be observed or measured. Okay. So a testable question is a specific question where one variable is changed. The results can be observed or measured. All right, so what changed when we did your paper airplanes? Well, we changed the size. All right, so when you asked your testable question, did you mention about the size of the paper where you folded that paper airplane? Okay. So let's look at these two examples, okay? And they're both about the same topic, mold. All right, so when we look at this, what will keep bread from growing mold? Okay, so what are we testing? Well, the growth of mold on bread. Okay, well, even though that's a good question, it's not a testable question. What will keep bread from growing mold? Well, it's really broad. And it's not really measurable, meaning we don't really know what or how they're testing the growth of mold. What are they going to use to measure? If mold is growing fast or slow, are they measuring by their observations, like what they see? Well, that's just an observation. And unfortunately, you cannot measure what people observe. So what are they testing? Are they testing temperature, the container the bread was in, where you place the bread, when it's not being used? Do you keep the bag closed or open? What kind of bread? It's really broad, okay? So this would be a non-example. It's not measurable. It's too broad. Now let's look at this example. How does temperature affect the growth of mold on bread? Well, with this question, we know the person is testing the growth of mold, okay, same as this one, all right, but this one has one variable that is the question. temperature. Okay, they are going to measure temperature and see if temperature affects whether mold grows fast or slow. Okay, so it's the growth is being measured by the temperature. Okay, that is the measurable thing. Okay, that's the measurable variable. They're going to test one variable. They're testing temperature. Okay. We know that they're using temperature, so if we know that, then they're probably using a thermometer, and a thermometer is measurable. So this is a good example, okay? This is a good example. It's measurable, one variable, temperature, and it's very specific. How does temperature affect the growth of mold on bread? Okay, so it can be observed or measured. It's very specific. And yes, this can be tested in investigation. This is too broad. We have no idea what they're doing. All right, let's look at the next idea. Oh, this is where you want to take a screenshot so you can copy this in your notebook. So the next part, okay, so thinking about that testable question here, okay, your next part of your science experiment is, can you write a hypothesis? All right, so we're going to look back at the question that you wondered about. Did you make it testable? And if you did, then writing a hypothesis is going to be really easy. So writing a hypothesis to a testable question is easy because we know exactly what you're testing. And if you write a question and you go to write the hypothesis, this is a great way to double check to make sure that you have a testable question. A hypothesis is a guess as to what you think is going to happen. All right, remember in that last little session there about can you write a question? You needed, or actually before that, okay, so when we were doing the paper airplanes, remember how I gave you different videos to watch so that you could do a little research about paper airplanes and about how real planes fly? Well, when I did the research on the mold, I found out why and how mold grows. So that's why I chose to do an experiment with temperature. So my hypothesis, my guess, is that temperature, if the temperature is cooler, the mold won't grow as fast as the bread if it's in a warmer area. So remember our if, then, because. So you use the word if, then, and because. If you can answer this based off of that question, then you have a good testable question. So I rewrote my hypothesis, okay? I think if we change the temperature to a cooler temperature, then the mold won't grow as fast on the bread. This is where my research came in, because mold grows in warm, moist temperatures. So this is my hypothesis based off of my question that I asked in the previous slide. Writing a hypothesis and making a guess to what you think will happen will help you come up with the different things, different variables, or environments you would like to test or experiment with. So I want you, before you go to the next session of the science video, I want you to stop the video and I want you to look back at your question and your hypothesis and make sure that it's written in a testable way and you're using an if, then, because in your hypothesis statement. Okay. And I'm going to have you upload your question and your hypothesis to the next activity so that I know that you went back and you double check to make sure that it's a testable question and your hypothesis has the words if, then, and because in the hypothesis. I want you to type those out, and what I want you to do, especially when you come to the if, then, because, I want you to underline or make bold the if, then, because so that they stand out. Okay, just like I did. And make sure you also put that I think, because remember, our hypothesis is a guess. So go ahead, take this time, go back, look at your question, look at your hypothesis, and make sure they're written in a testable way.